Now for a game which illustrates some of the strategic dangers which face white when he takes on e5 in an inappropriate situation. This is a game by Michael Adams from a Canadian Open in 2009, which was excellently annotated by Neil MacDonald in a recent introductory text to the Roy Lopez. But after the initial moves, Adams selects the Breyer variation, so rather than his traditional Marshall, which presumably would lead to too many forcing lines where black would struggle to create winning chances. So knight b8 is, I think, more appropriate given the difference in class between the two players. But for the initial moves, I think white conducts himself quite reasonably. G6, bishop g5, h6, bishop d2, bishop g7. But now white makes a very major concession, which is that he exchanges this pawn on e5. There are a number of other ways to continue here. I would be tempted with bishop d3 followed by a4, for instance, to try to gain some space on the queen side. But after d takes e5, d takes e5, suddenly, while you could say that the position is equal, I think in practice it's easier for black to play, because the central space has suddenly been equalized, while black has a very standard maneuver of his knight to e6, for instance, where it's going to be very well placed. He's just been given more space, I think, for the development of his pieces. Now white played bishop e3 to try to restrain that, but now queen e7, again with some ideas of putting the knight on c5. Knight d2, and now h5. So Adams gaining some kingside space, and white continues playing in quite a passive fashion. I think that I don't want to guess the motives of the player of the white pieces here, but certainly if while ordinarily given that class difference you'd be delighted to draw with Michael Adams, this certainly isn't the way to go about it. While d takes e5 equalizes the central space, it doesn't maintain the advantages of white's position. And so here already I think black has probably a significant advantage. Certainly his pieces seem to be more actively placed than white's. Rook e8 is a very standard move, taking advantage of the fact that the rook is opposed to the queen, and the queen doesn't, unlike black's queen, have a particularly good square to go to, because I think it'd be well placed on the e-file, but white has saw fit to block the e-file with all of these pieces. So white played knight c1 to try to create a square for his queen, but now knight c5, forcing f3 to try to protect this pawn, and now knight e6. So the knight is extremely well placed on e6, controlling various important dark squares, and we'll see how Adams manages to increase the control after queen e2, getting the queen off the d file. Now c5, gaining more space. Clearly any potential weakness of the d5 square is something of a fiction at the moment, because white has no piece which can even threaten to go there in the short term. White now sought to menace the black bishop, but it was able to just move away. And after a4 attacking b5, Adams was able to protect this very efficiently with c4. So now the black queenside pawns aren't weak. Black has options of playing knight c5 followed by knight d3, for instance. And after queen f2, he simply rerouted this knight through to c5, reckoning that the other one was very well placed on e6. So after white exchange on b5, rook fb1, I suppose trying to, if not to get some queenside play, at least to gain space on that flank, or potentially to exchange some pawns. But after knight dc5, b3 was an unfortunate choice, because black had this move, knight d4, which is pretty decisive if white were to take. Then after he takes d4, it's not difficult to see that black is going to regain a lot of material here. After bishop f4, for instance, d3, and if the bishop moves back, then c3. It just looks painful. So instead, white played b4, but this is slightly too much of a concession. And now after knight takes c2, none of these tactics work for white, and he ends up just being a piece down, and his c-pawn is no compensation, and he resigned here. Adam's move with knight d4, of course, is reminiscent of a different game between Bobby Fischer and Kalmov from Havana, 1965. This is a very uncharacteristic loss for Fischer, but unfortunately it has to be shown here. Where in the Shigerin variation, knight d2, knight c6, Fischer, as he normally did, actually, he didn't really favour the structures with d5. He preferred seeking to exploit this outpost on d5 with his own knight. But now after knight f1, bishop e6, knight e3, rook a8, queen e2, c4. This position, as far as I'm aware, is still thought of as fine for black, basically because of Kalmov's treatment, in that after knight g5 he effectively called white's bluff with h6, because after an exchange on e6, now this pawn, while it is doubled, controls very important squares. And Fischer played b4, which is not a good move, but this game has kind of gone down in history because of being able to achieve an idea like knight d4 so easily against Bobby Fischer. And actually after an exchange on d4, black isn't even losing any material in view of d3. So Fischer simply played a3, which is a bit despondent, and after this, black's clearly better and went on to win. But in terms of, I think one of the takeaways from this game, it's rare that you see a game like this, I suppose, in terms of the class difference between the players in the Adams example. But it does illustrate, I think, the strategic dangers, or some of the strategic dangers, which white faces after an ill-considered trade on e5. All other things being equal, taking on e5 has to be regarded as a concession. So I think a very specific motive is needed before that trade is considered by white.